There is a real gap in the kind of training for those people who have been told no to classical text or to the opportunity to be invited to an audition. So I'm curious about, what are your brainstorms about practical solutions? Yeah, for opening the doors to real inclusivity in the professional world.
I think it's about bringing in young people into a company. You know, I often say that if we don't invest in the 23-year-old young woman of color who will leave Seattle because there's no work and because she's not getting opportunities, when I'm looking for the 45-year-old who has chops, where will they be? With Upstart Crow, that's one of the things that we've done also is try to welcome in young women of color. And training programs are great, and training programs are important, but we do our best training in the rehearsal room, wouldn't y'all say? Right? Like, that's when they're really learning. So it's a commitment to that when you're in a company, and that's what happens when there are different generations in the company of a production of Upstart Crow. Those young women are learning from older women, and that's the other thing they told me. They don't often get that experience, right? Because if they're a young woman in the cast, the older people in the cast are usually men, right? So this system of mentorship that is actually within a production, it's and training ground, it's there. It's about companies really being committed to diversity and what it means in terms of justice, and not just look at those brown bodies on stage. Because that's not, like a whole bunch of people of color on stage who really aren't trained for the work is not the solution. So how do we give them the training, right? So that means being committed to mentorship in a production process, right? Which I know is hard when you're trying to create a professional show. But you have to be strategic about it. It doesn't mean you can't do it, right? And you have to mentor people through it. That's, small paths. And then all kinds of other ways in which education programs should meld with professional companies also.
Curious to know, out of the classical canon, specifically Shakespeare's pieces, if there's anything you think is just done and does not need to be repeated anymore, and it's just time to retire it and move on to something else, or if there is a piece like that, that's something that you find really exciting and are interested to take on.
Well, there's a lot of controversy about some Shakespeare plays right now. Taming of the Shrew. How do we really go into a play like Taming of the Shrew today? Othello. Some people have real issues with those plays too. So I don't know if we're done, but I don't think we can continue to do them the way we've done them. Does that make sense? I don't think you can look at a play like Measure for Measure without thinking about sexual assault, right? I don't think you can look at a play like Merchant of Venice without thinking of racism, right? So just looking at the lightness of the plays or one aspect of the play is, I think, something that we can't... The plays are complicated. Bill Rausch, who's the artistic director of Oregon Shakespeare Festival, said something that really has stuck with me. And he says, are these plays racist or about racism? And the truth is, they're both, right? They're both. So we have to go into them. And so I just did As You Like It, and there were even doing As You Like It, great play, right? I found problematic things in As You Like It as I was going along about male-female relationships. But I had to look at, okay, how have our attitudes changed these days towards this, and what's at the essence of what this play is about? So how do I keep the essence of it and keep us in a contemporary mindset, but not lose the essence of it? Because that wasn't necessarily the intent, right? So I don't know that there's one way to tackle all these problems, but we have to tackle them. I wouldn't say no. Maybe if somebody asked me to do Taming of the Shrew, I'd have to really think about how I was going to do Taming of the Shrew, right? It wouldn't be like, oh yeah, I think I'd, I'm loath to say just put that play away, because I do love the plays, but definitely there are ones that I am more drawn to than others.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm a theater nerd, so I have a question, or I wanted if you could elaborate more on when you're talking about the Shakespeare language and having it sing, and if you could talk about that, because I have an appreciation for Shakespeare, but I still feel intimidated by the language. But then I also just wanted to share anecdotally, so I've directed and produced in the past, and specifically in relation to the Black community, what I loved to do was these exercises of trying to say, from a kind of Black lens, who would Hamlet be or who would Othello be? So I did in 2005 attempt a production. It was called Hamlet X, and it was the idea of Hamlet being a modern day Malcolm X, and I said in the Nation of Islam. And for all intents and purposes, it worked, and on some aspects it didn't. But what was really exciting was seeing the Black community come and be like, oh, wow, because they had both a little bit of a context about Hamlet, but they also had Malcolm X, and so there was a lot of, And then I also was going to share, too, I've done that exercise in my mind, like, well, who's the Othello? And I was going to share who I think that it is. Yeah. Well, I'd like to tell you who I think it is? Tiger Woods.
Oh, man.
Within the context of an all-wide world of golf and things like that. So anyway, I just wanted to share that brought back a conversation that I've had with myself. And then finally, too, is that I absolutely recognize the power of what you are able to be able to create for the women in those spaces. And so, bravo. And I hope that work just continues to reverberate, and that, in fact, whether it's the young women across the street, that I can see how they will build on that. So thank you for sharing.
And I think that that's really important because the Upstart Crow creates this space, and we've done this. I have had this feeling also that it's this coveted space also, and then it starts to feel like it's an exclusive space, right? Because so many people want into the space, and I'm like, I can only do so many plays, I can't do this. And so there's also this thing where I've talked to other young directors saying, I don't own this idea. This isn't mine. You're not stepping on my toe if you decide to do an all-female play, because I think, especially in Seattle, sometimes we can feel like, oh, that belongs to so-and-so, that belongs to so-and-so. It doesn't belong to me. I hope lots of people do all-female plays, because we can't do it all. We can't satisfy the need for that. There's a huge need for that work. I think Seattle Shakespeare Company, I heard, is doing an all-female 12th Night? No, all-female. Romeo and Juliet. They're pairing that with an all-male and 12th Night. But that's still equity, right? That's still half-half. Well, one of the things I didn't mention is that about, depending on how you count on it, 12% of the characters in Shakespeare are female, but over 50% of the professional actors are female or non-binary, right? So how do we start to think about equity? And then, when I said it's never enough, like one of the things, it's still not enough, right? Because we started out as all female, and then as we developed and grew, we started thinking about intersectionality, and then we expanded to now we call ourselves diverse female and non-binary. And we welcome cisgendered women, transgender women, non-binary folk. Because the idea is that we're creating a space for people who have felt disenfranchised from that space. So we want to try and use the most inclusive language as we can to welcome people in that space. And then it's still not enough, because then I'm like, okay, we've got all these people on stage. Who's in the audience watching us? Is it a bunch of rich white people watching us? Like, how can we reach out to more diverse populations? How can we bring a Black community in to help them see themselves in this work also, right? I think there are also many, many kinds of ways to do this work. This is a way that I've found to do the work. Doesn't mean it's the only way to tackle this problem, right? So I think doing something where you bring Hamlet and Malcolm X together is fantastic. I applaud that.
We see so much emphasis placed on being in STEM, and in particular women pursuing careers in STEM. Can you talk about why it's so important to pursue the arts and what the arts
How long
does
you got?
for the mind and the body and the soul?
One of the things that I think that very few people will say in a classroom in any university is, I want you to stop thinking. And I think that my colleagues who teach in theater will say that. Stop thinking right now. Respond to your intuition. Respond to your body. My colleague Alice, I think she's a choreographer that I work with, a dear friend of mine, I love the thing she says, your body knows more than your mind does right now. Your body knows more than your mind does right now. Trusting ourselves and our bodies. So just from that perspective of teaching the whole person, the arts puts you in touch with your body and your emotions and your intuition and your spirit in a way that no other field can. And then it also is a source of creative thinking that people in STEM need, right? So like I teach a core class, telling stories on stage, and I often have engineers and nurses and people in STEM in that class, and I think it's really vital for them because it's about collaboration. Theater is, like I said, they have to work in a group and figure and solve a problem, right? So learning those people skills. So, I mean, I can talk elegiacally about what art does, but I can also give you hard skills. I can give you the hard skills that you're going to need in the workplace also. And the fact that I'm teaching you a different way of thinking that is based in analysis and critical thinking, but is creative. That is thinking of the way that it hasn't been done, the way that you could do it differently. What if you turned it upside down? What if you opened it inside out, right? What are the tactics that you can use to get away from the normal way of thinking about things? And that's what STEM needs also. So everybody, every student should take an acting class or a theater class. You heard it here.
Thank you for reinforcing that.